Right, excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andreas Bieler. I'm the Vice President of the University and College Union here at the University of Nottingham. It's my pleasure to chair this afternoon's seminar. And we have today across the UK, actually, not just here at the University of Nottingham, our Workplace Day of Action in solidarity with Palestine. And already at 1 o'clock, we had a well-attended lunchtime rally in the courtyard of the main administration building here at the university, staff and students together, demanding that the university engages in the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign, that it ends all links with Israeli institutions of higher education due to their complicity in the ongoing genocide. We demand that our university ends all partnerships with arms manufacturers. And we also ask and demand from our university that it establishes studentships and scholarships for students and staff from Palestine. It won't be enough in all probability today to achieve those ends, but we've been there in the past, we've been here today, and we will be also there again in the future and bring these demands forward. But I'm in particular also pleased that we have this second event today at this Workplace Day of Action, allowing us on the one hand to hear directly from Palestine about situations ongoing on the ground, as well as hear from local activists here in Nottingham about the increasing repression against solidarity campaigns in the UK itself. And ultimately those struggles are, of course, linked. So we have three speakers with us. First, we will hear from Xavier Abu Eid. We have then Rahma Zein, and third will be Yousuf Farooq. Each of our speakers will have more or less 15 minutes time, please. So if for good time management, that would be appreciated, 15 minutes. And that then should leave us at the end also with another 30 minutes for questions and discussion. The event is recorded. All the speakers have agreed on that. And so we are hoping to make it available on a YouTube channel afterwards. Okay, but first I'm now handing over to my colleague here at the University, Victor Katan, who is going to introduce Xavier Abu Eid. Victor, over to you, and then straight afterwards, Xavier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and also former colleague, Xavier Abu Eid, who's a political scientist, currently a PhD student at Trinity College Dublin, but he's also a former communications advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization, where we used to work together with the late Dr. Saeb Erekat, who some of you may know. He was involved in a lot of the peace negotiations when that meant something many years ago. And Xavier is also the author of a book called Rooted in Palestine: Palestinian Christians and the Struggle for National Liberation, from 1917 to 2004. He's Xavier. He's got Chile. He's Palestinian, but he has Chilean roots as well, and he's talking to us from Bethlehem in Palestine. And his title is Explaining the Ethnic Cleansing in Gaza. And I can't think of anyone more qualified to speak about this subject than yourself, Javier. I look very much forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, for your very generous intervention. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and for the work that most of you are doing for Palestinian rights in the United Kingdom. And well, Victor would be the expert to talk with you more about the role of the United Kingdom in Palestine. I will not talk much about this, but I think it's important to remember that we all have a responsibility. It's a shared responsibility for humanity and for whoever believes that we should have an international community based on the rule of law. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about the concept of ethnic cleansing in Gaza at this stage for a very particular reason, because a lot of the coverage, and I'm sure that some of you are going to agree with me, on what has been happening in Palestine since October the 7th, 2023, mass media, sometimes they try to set history as if everything started on October the 7th. Or even if things did not start on October the 7th, they would kind of imply that the policies Israeli occupation are implementing now in the occupied Gaza Strip are new policies or policies that were pushed mainly because of October the 7th. But that's not the case. When we are talking about ethnic cleansing, we are talking about one of the central policies that the Zionist movement brought to Palestine. And if we go to the research, for example, of Dr. Noor Masalha, he would say that between 1937, 1938, we already had Zionist leaders. We're talking about 10 years before the creation of the State of Israel, that were already planning for a mass expulsion of Palestinians. If you go to the research of Professor Ilam Pape, or the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, we're actually going to talk about the Zionist commissions that were implemented for the idea of ethnic cleansing even before that date. But 37, 38, after the great strike that took place in 1936 against the British mandate and against the Zionist project in Palestine, the Zionist movement started to think even more about the need to implement their plan through the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Now, this is a very important point, because when the UN divided Palestine in 1947 through Resolution 181, the quote-unquote Jewish state was going to have only about 10,000 inhabitants of Jewish religion, more than its own Palestinian Christian and Muslim population. So one may wonder, for those who believe that Israel wanted to respect the partition resolution, if it was viable for them in their idea of changing the demography and the identity of this country, if it was going to be viable to have a Jewish state with only 10,000 Jews more than Palestinian Christians and Muslims. And therefore, the idea of ethnic cleansing comes once again in what we know now as the Nakba, or the catastrophe of 1948. We're going to get to Gaza now just in a couple of minutes. But I think it's also important to remember that the international community at the beginning, they did not accept the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And we had the Resolution 194 on December 11th, 1948, which made very clear that Palestinian refugees had the right to return. Why I'm making this point? Because only a few months later, in May 1949, if I'm not mistaken, 11th of May 1949, when Israel became a full member of the United Nations through Resolution 237, this membership was conditioned to the commitments Israel had made to implement the UN Charter, and particularly to implement two UN resolutions, Resolution 181, which talks about two states, and Resolution 194 on the right of return of Palestinian refugees. And you may know that until now, Israel has not implemented neither, nor the two-state solution, nor the right of return of Palestinian refugees. Now, let's talk about Gaza a little bit. Between 70 to 80% of the population in Gaza, they are the outcome of this process, of the Nakba process of 1948. They come originally from places in either central Palestine or southern Palestine, what we know as Yafa, Ramle, Lid, Asdod, Majdal, Bir al-Sab'a, up till Imrashrash by the Red Sea. That's important background, because when some people are talking about the need for them to get out of Gaza, I think they've been demanding their right to get out of Gaza, but not to go out of Palestine, but to return to where they belong to, where they originate from, and where Israel committed that they would return to in return of their membership at the United Nations, which are the places I mentioned, and not some place of the Sinai or Jordan or elsewhere. Now, attempts of transferring Palestinians from Gaza are not new. We're talking about attempts that took place even in the 50s, when the trilateral aggression took place between the UK, France, and Israel against Egypt. There were already ideas for the transfer or the forcible transfer of Palestinians from Gaza. Many people in social media were sharing, for example, over the past few days, the front page of Ad-Dastur newspaper, one of the main newspaper in Jordan back in the late 60s, early 70s, which for those who like history, it's a continuation of Philistine newspaper, which was the large Palestinian newspaper that used to be edited in Jaffa before the Nakba. That was already talking about the plans of mass displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. And we can remember that even the one who signed the peace agreement with the PLO, Yitzhak Rabin, in 1993, who signed the Oslo Agreement, he had a very famous quote that he dreams with the moment that he would just wake up from his sleep and find Gaza under the sea. Gaza is a place that from the very beginning rebelled against Israeli occupation and against the denial of the Palestinian right to self-determination. And I think to understand where we are now, we have to understand that point. Because politically, if we're talking now 77 years later, Israel is a country that does not have a political program for a peaceful solution. They disagree either with a two-state solution on the 1967 borders, and they also disagree with the idea of one single democratic state for everyone. So the only idea that they actually have, and it's a policies they are implementing, not just on the ground, but also on their legislation and on their very insightful rhetoric, is how to perpetuate the denial of the Palestinian right to self-determination. And what's happening in Gaza since October the 7th, for many, is an opportunity for them to proceed with those plans furthermore. Let's remember that before the end of 2023, there was already a leak from a report made by the Israeli Ministry of Intelligence that said clearly that this was the moment for Israel to get rid of as many Palestinian population from Gaza as possible. But not only that, by November 2023, there was an op-ed published in Wall Street Journal by two Israeli politicians. That's very significant. One is Dani Danon, who comes from the Zionist right, Likud, who is the current Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. And the second one is Ram Ben Barak. Ram Ben Barak represents what people may refer to as a centrist, even kind of centrist left, in Israel. And both of them signed on an op-ed at Wall Street Journal calling for, quote unquote, the voluntary immigration of Palestinians from Gaza and calling on the international community to bring Palestinians through a system of quotas per country. That's very important because here we're not talking about a policy that comes just from the far right or some right wingers in Israel. We're talking about a policy which is almost a matter of consensus among Zionist political parties. Very few Israeli, mainly left-wing Zionist officials have been coming out saying openly that they don't want the mass displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Let's say that even a few days ago, the leader of the Israeli Zionist left, if anyone could talk about the concept of Zionist left, but there is a party called the Democrats that comes as a combination of Meretz and the Labour Party. Mr. Yair Golan, who had already said that people in Gaza should starve until the captives are returned. He already said that he would prefer for the people of Gaza not to be in Gaza. But I think the main difference between someone like Yair Golan in the center left or left of the Zionist spectrum and someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir, on the far right in Israel, the main difference is that both of them dream with not finding Palestinians in Gaza. But I think at least Yair Golan understands that that's impossible. But the fact that a leader of quote unquote the progressive camp in Israel comes out stating something like this, it adds to the dehumanization of Palestinians that continues all over the Israeli political spectrum. I would like to conclude by saying that the Israeli project in Palestine, the Zionist project in Palestine, is very predictable. And to be very honest with you, I will not claim that I am the best analyst here. I will not claim I'm brilliant, neither any of this. Don't believe to what Victor said on his introduction. But on August last year, for me, it was clear where we were going. Because I also want to invite you not to think only of Gaza. Think of what's happening all over the occupied Palestine. Over the past 28 days, we've had over 40,000 Palestinians forcibly displaced in the northern West Bank, in Jenin and Tulkarem. And why it was so predictable? Because signs they are not going to move for a peace process. They are not going to endorse a two-state solution. They are not going, definitely they will not endorse the idea of equality, which seems to be a threat for their political ideology. And the only thing that's left for them is ethnic cleansing and annexation. And why I mentioned August last year, because the person who at that time was Israeli foreign minister, Israel Katz, who's now they refer to him as the Israeli defense minister. In Palestine, we call him the war minister or the occupation minister. He issued a statement, very interesting. I will not read it completely, but I have it here, where he basically said that the refugee camps in the West Bank are controlled by Iran, not by the Palestinian Authority, and that they're smuggling weapons from Jordan. For me, it was clear that this message sent two things. First of all, that they were going to proceed with the annexation of the Jordan Valley, which I think probably it may happen very soon. And by the way, in the previous Trump administration, they were prepared for annexing the Jordan Valley, and COVID saved us. That's just for to make the note. The plans were there. But the second point is that they were going to focus on refugee camps in the West Bank. And I don't know if you have been following the news, but Israel is shutting down UNRWA, which is the UN agency for Palestinian refugees. In Jerusalem, it's already shut down. They will make it very difficult for them to work here in the occupied West Bank. And they believe in this logic that I think was brought by the previous Trump administration, that they can preempt the outcome of any political process by trying to end a political file before it's even negotiated. So, for example, the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital as a way of saying, well, now we don't negotiate about Jerusalem. They may push for annexation as a way to say, well, now we don't negotiate over settlements. And now, with the issue of the right of return of Palestinian refugees, they want to cancel UNRWA. And some people even call for destroying all refugee camps in the West Bank. That's in a letter sent by settler leaders to the Israeli political establishment a few months ago. And let's remember that those who are making policy in Israel now, many of them are settlers or people who actually believe that the only way to have a future for Israel is to push for the annexation of the occupied West Bank. So when in August last year, we knew that they were going to move to the occupied West Bank, we understand once again that the dynamics of ethnic cleansing in Gaza are part of a prolonged process that comes back from the Nakba in 1948, from the plans they had actually even before in the 30s and 20s for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And since Israel continues to negate the Palestinian right to self-determination, including the Palestinian right of return, and how this has been totally tolerated and normalized by the international community, which Western power talks about the right of return of Palestinian refugees. I think the fact that they have seen a green light from a big part of the international community, the fact that they understand that, for example, for a government like the British government, it's not fine to have occupation, it's not fine to have annexation, but at the same time, that's not going to bring any consequences on the bilateral relations between Israel and the UK. That's the importance of what you are trying to do in your campuses and universities, to take action by your own. I think we should not just focus on what's happening in Gaza, which is a genocide, and of course we have to always stop there, but we should put it on the larger context, which is the idea of perpetuating the denial of the Palestinian right to self-determination, either through a genocide in Gaza, through annexation in the occupied West Bank, or, which is this very dangerous idea that whether it's implemented or not, it's already very scary to have the US president presenting ethnic cleansing an international crime as a solution for what's going on here. I think I completed my 15 minutes, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Javi, for this excellent intervention and outlining the situation, and especially for speaking to us on the day that actually the house of your elderly aunt had been raided by the Israeli military. So thanks for making time for us. So we are going to have two more speakers, and then at the end we have time for questions. And so please stay with us. Yeah, there will be a chance to get back to some of the issues later on. Right, so our next speaker is Rahma Zein, an independent journalist and Palestine advocate. Rahma, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you with us. Please, over to you for 15 minutes. Thank you. You are muted, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you.
So I won't talk for long because I think it's important to have a sort of even brainstorm session as to how to move forward, because I think this is very much top of mind when everyone is speaking. What I will say is that what you see is not consistent is the different forms of resistance throughout history. What has been consistent is your one occupation, is Israel, is Zionism. So when you have that in mind, this simple, very simple sentence of this is an occupation, they are an oppressor, and these are an oppressed people, you can cut through the noise. So what Zionism has done throughout the years and what has been successful throughout the years was create this noise, was create this PR machine so that you don't have time to reiterate that this is the core of the issue, and instead you get bogged down by their power of three key messages. Anti-Semitic, they're the one democracy in the Middle East. By supporting Israel, you are supporting a new modern era that is actually bringing peace to the Middle East. All three complete lies. So the important thing is narrative, is to empower this narrative. And bear in mind, it is not in the oppressor's benefit for you to think that you can do something, for you to have a hand. But imagine if everybody who is now, let's say, politicized, who is aware, who was not aware of the Palestinian plight beforehand, imagine if every single person who is now aware put this awareness and put this knowledge into action. And when I say action, there are different forms of action. Imagine if every single person adopted a kind of action that they incorporate into even their lifestyle. Imagine the effect that would then have. So it is not in their benefit for you to believe that you have a power, which you do. So it's about ignoring this noise. One of the simplest things when you listen to media, they constantly speak about Gaza. They don't even use the word Palestine. If you really listen to media, you will notice they dare not use the word Palestine. And even when Trump was speaking, as audacious as what he was saying is, he ignored to say anything about the West Bank. Why? Because they don't want you to focus on what's happening in the West Bank now. They don't want you to note that there are over 920 checkpoints in the West Bank. So awareness is key. Cutting through this noise is key. Being well informed and going back to the core. This is an oppression, and these people are unoppressed. And once you reiterate that, you combat this narrative. Now, let's look at Zionism. What they have done effectively is their power is actually outside of Palestine. The power of lobbying. They're in every single industry. We mock artists who won't speak up for Palestine because who's their manager? A Zionist. So it's about also empowering people who are like-minded, who have an ethical stance when it comes to Palestine in these different industries. It's a long game. You know, sometimes you bog yourself. I always compare it with, for example, mountaineering. You're climbing a mountain. If you keep bogging yourself down by looking at the summit, you may not make it. But you look at the baby steps. And you're not fighting this to win. You're fighting this because it's the right thing to do. It's as simple as that. And once everybody incorporates that in their mind, they can have this as part of their lifestyle. For example, when I say this in the means of, it is absolutely insane that we have IDF soldiers, after shooting children, going to Southeast Asia to holiday, taking yoga classes, buying land and whatnot. So me as a normal citizen, I have a right to call on my local police if I see an IDF soldier. And thanks to IDF soldiers, they've been putting their videos on TikTok galore. So it's not going to exactly be very difficult to not recognize them. So let's use that. And everyone then has a right to call on their national police. And then you can look at other foundations who are also helping. Hind Ragab Foundation, Tech for Palestine. There is something for everybody to do. There is always something to do when it comes to resisting. And, you know, I think about it as one door. Some person may use a key, some person may decide to knock. So it's not bogging yourself down by thinking of who's not doing. Because, I mean, we look at now the scenario, and I feel a lot of people are shocked because your previous thought leaders, your institutions, all of the people that you had looked at, now Palestine has exposed them for being maybe puppets who want a chair on the table, who don't want to speak up because they're going to lose certain deals. So it's not about, so now you have this empty field where all these people that you had previously placed on a pedestal, be it even the UoN or whatnot, have sort of been exposed as not, I don't want to say treacherous, it doesn't matter whether treacherous or weakness, they yield the same result, which is impotence. So what you need to do is empower the people who are speaking up, your own, so that instead of having to appease a certain narrative so that you have a seat on their table, you create your own table. I mean, I'm Egyptian. I've spent my whole life in the region. I remember we used to always have this narrative of appeasement. You don't want to you would always beat around the bush when it comes to political conversation, and this was deemed a means to send a message across. Now even the ones who are well spoken, who have the political jargon, who are able, are seeing that even that when they go off script by calling it what it is, let's go back to this, an oppressed and oppressor no longer have a seat on the table. So it's not about appeasement. It's not about talking to. It's about talking louder than, so that you are more effective, so that you yield an actual result. So moving forward right now is not to bog yourself down with the noise, is to be extremely aware of what media is saying, is to not fall into the sensationalism of Trump, and to work grassroots. And this is not reinventing the wheel. This is what Zionism has done for years, by being in the right industries, talking to the right people, lobbying, making sure to help each other. And this is what everybody needs to do now. And although it might seem a bit dark, I mean, we just saw the US spokesperson calling the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians majestic. She had the audacity of using the word majestic as if it's a trip to Disneyland. So when you see that, you realize that this is what a racist is. They're not only going to wait for you to accommodate their wants, but to completely accept. And for the longest time, they've convinced the world that it is a norm for me to take your land and for you to do nothing about it. That is the power of their narrative. That is the power of PR. So it is important to speak. It is important to boycott. It is important to look at foundations that are now doing something. It is important to take action and not just, you know, sometimes I think protests are, sometimes it's just, you know, making yourself feel like you're doing something, although they are, of course, effective. But when you're in that protest network, see who's doing what, put yourself into different coalitions and really band together against this, because Zionism is not just a danger to Palestinians. And anybody who thinks, and I think a lot of the Arab world is realizing that the sense of entitlement is very much ingrained in their ideology. So they're not just setting a danger to Palestinians. This is a danger for the whole world, because they're setting a sort of precedence as to what is allowed to do. They are creating and enabling bullies.
Many thanks, Rahma, for this powerful call to action. Very appropriate and appreciated precisely on this day today, where we have the Workplace Day of Action in the UK across the various workplaces, thinking about how we can concretely support Palestine liberation. Thank you. So please stay with us. We will have this question and discussion, and precisely as you indicate, discussion about what we can do in concrete terms also after our third speaker. And actually, it's a good moment to move to our third speaker, because Yousuf Farooq has been involved in organizing all kinds of different moments of resistance in the UK, in Nottingham, but also beyond. And of course, Yousuf, you have also experienced the increasing police brutality clamping down on Palestine solidarity actions. And please, over to you. So 15 minutes, as with our other speakers.
Okay, firstly, thank you very much to the speakers before me. I've certainly learnt a lot, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion that we will be having after my presentation. Of course, also thank you to the UCU to giving me this opportunity to speak. So I guess as has been introduced, and most of you will be aware that I was actually arrested at the last national demonstration for Palestine in the United Kingdom, in London. And as part of my bail conditions, I am not allowed to attend any pro-Palestinian, and this is explicitly written, I am not to attend a pro-Palestinian demonstration for the next 3 months. So they have actually not just taken, so the reason they've given is to stop you from committing further offenses if there was actually an offense that was committed in the first place, because protest is a fundamental human right, and we must be rallying around to defend this fundamental human right. Actually, what we are seeing is the actualization of many things that we've been warning of that could happen, especially those who were involved in the Kill the Bill protest, etc. Now, I think it's a very concerning time because this specific bail condition, where effectively, if I would like to, and I would like to, you know, raise my voice against a genocide, I am prohibited to do so. On that day, we saw mass arrests. Actually, this is something off the scale of what we have witnessed in the United Kingdom. And this has not formed out of a vacuum. But I also think it's quite important that we analyze all the elements that have led up to having such a moment in British history where protest is effectively banned, and going beyond this, beyond the events of the last national demonstration. I think we must have a serious conversation of various factors that is leading to the stifling of discussion. And I will come on to the element of how securitization is stifling pro-Palestinian solidarity in the United Kingdom, which is also a global phenomenon. So if we look back to around November of 2024, or November 2023 rather, we were looking to hold the Million March for Palestine. And at the time, Suella Braverman had said that, look, these are hate marches. That's what was what these marches were painted as. We also even had, from the very outset, the potential banning of waving of the Palestinian flag. But through resistance, this is actually something that we were able to challenge. And we don't need to go into proving that these marches are not violent, proving that these marches are not hateful, proving that these marches are not anti-Semitic. That's all out in the open. But we should be having a serious discussion on how our civil liberties are being stifled today, how they're being stifled in response to resistance against genocide, and also how in the past, how have we got here, and how we must work to prevent further stifling of human rights, further stifling of solidarity. Solidarity, just having the feeling, having an emotion, having a sense of pride for those who are oppressed, and expressing that, calling for their liberation, is something that is so pertinent for us to do. I'm going to put some things into perspective. These marches have been deemed and maligned and smeared as hate marches. We're all aware of that. But we have to think, we had actual pogroms against Muslims and other minorities in UK over the summer. This is in our lived memory. And actually, many of the people on this call today attending this seminar, I stood with them and I thank them for that, and everyone who had organized against the far right when literal pogroms were taking place against Muslims. Whilst people were driving their cars, they had their windows smashed. We had people being pulled out of cars. We had people being assaulted on the streets. We had mosques being torched. We've had missiles and bricks being thrown at Muslims, right? And this was not one event. This is actually a day-to-day lived reality for Muslims, for minorities, for ethnic minorities, for refugee communities. But where has been this heavy-handed policing that we got against what was a peaceful demonstration of solidarity that we saw on the 18th of January? Actually, people who have been victims of hate crime, I just mentioned that I was that bricks and missiles were being thrown at people. This is something outside of the summer riots that I've experienced myself. That whilst at work, just driving along, I had a piece of a brick, stones thrown at me that hit my head. And when I reported it as a hate crime, it was immediately saying, well, it's hard to prove and all of it. It was completely left out. It was completely thrown out. The police said it's a non-issue, but they are able to mobilize their resources. Hundreds, actually thousands of police officers out on one day to intimidate and to stifle people from speaking. Actually, at the time of my arrest, one thing that was quite surprising for me is they actually had arranged for coaches that were filled with protesters. So we weren't taken away in police vans or police cars, no. We had to wait for the coach to be filled before going to the police station, which is something that it shows that there has been a planned attempt at intimidating our people. We also had the Leicester riots a few years back, and that was painted as cricket hooliganism, which is something that's unheard of. I mean, the cricket fans amongst us would know how tame cricket can be, and we don't go around being violent to each other after a cricket match. That's not what happens. What we actually saw, and many reports have gone into how this was orchestrated by the BJP, the far right in India, had a direct hand in these riots, right? But where was the heavy policing there? You know, it was painted as a cricket hooliganism and people fighting against cricket, but no, the reality was that these were real hate marches against against minorities. But again, we've seen a double standard in terms of the policing. And I think a key element for this, which will be my concluding point, because I don't want to take too much time, is that we need to understand and have this ingrained in our heads that the struggle for liberation of Palestine is a multifaceted struggle. It has many elements. And one of those elements is that the struggle for the liberation of Palestine is a struggle against racism. And some things that we will fall victim to will be furthered out. In 2015, the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act was passed in British Parliament, making prevent a statutory duty amongst all public sector organizations. We found therein that people wearing Palestine badges were taken into prevent. People who draw a Palestine flag. There are so many examples. I need not to go into that, but we've seen that it's been used to stifle discussion about Palestine, to stifle free speech about Palestine. Palestine is not purely a Muslim issue. Palestine is not an issue of purely Muslim liberation, even though elements of the Palestinian resistance may use that, and they have the full right to do so. Anyone can stand in solidarity for Palestine. The Palestinian people themselves, not all of them are Muslim. Not everyone in this call, the majority of people, probably are not. But it's been racialized as a Muslim issue. In 2023, the government had a so-called independent review of Prevent taken place by the renowned Islamophobe who was once involved in Charity Commission, Shawcross. And Shawcross, what is he, even though we know it's been stifling free speech, even though we know children have been left with trauma after being referred to Prevent, some of the key things that he is arguing is that, well, the ideology of the extreme right wing is too broad, and the ideology of Islamism is too narrow. He says that we have to expand Prevent. Actually, we have to put more into it. Palestine is mentioned many a time in this report. So we have the government, successive governments. Remember, it was the Labour Party who introduced Prevent. It was the Conservative Party that made it a statutory duty. It was the Conservative Party that is now calling for its expansion. And now we will ultimately see more of this. And we have seen that the counter-extremism, basically, what in reality is stifling dissent and has been a lived experience for Muslims and other people, is being broadened out. Climate activists are being deemed as terrorists. They are using British Muslims as a testing ground, and then it's going to be expanded to us all. And as human rights activists, remember, we are for liberation. We are against injustice against anyone. So today we may protest for Palestine. We may protest against climate justice. But this will ultimately be widened out. So my final point, how do we respond to this? The simple answer is we look at the past 15 months, we look at the past 75 years, we look at the past 100 years. How have the Palestinians responded to their continued ethnic cleansing and all the crimes that are taking place against them? Ultimately, is through resistance. Ultimately, it's taking it head on and tackling it without fear, without intimidation. There is no other way for liberation. We should be made aware. We must be tracking what is happening to us, what is happening to our movements. But ultimately, we cannot let them let them intimidate us. And furthermore, we should honor the 70,000 or 200,000 plus martyrs that we have been campaigning for. We honor their memory because they were martyred in defense. They were martyred for staying put, for refusing to leave their homeland, and something that they will continue to do, and that spirit of the Palestinian people can never be broken. We have to learn from that and learn how to resist, learn how to be steadfast in order to honor their memory. Thank you very much, and I hope this has been helpful.
Many thanks, Yousuf, for this indeed very helpful intervention, and especially also to make the link that the struggle for Palestine liberation is also a struggle against racism. And it will be important to make those links between the different campaigns. Now, we have a good 30 minutes, and I open up these sessions for everyone to ask questions to our speakers, of course, but also perhaps to provide us with suggestions of what we can do next in our struggle here for the liberation of the Palestinian people, but also against this kind of clamping down on our right to resist. So colleagues, perhaps who wants to speak, please raise your hands. And I've got already two people indicating. I shall take you in turn. And perhaps for our speakers, I will reserve some time at the very end for you to get back to us. Yeah. And so you will have the final word. So first, my colleague Lopalic, who is our president of the University and College Union here at the university, and then over to you, Adib. Lopa.
First, thank you, all three, for fantastic talks. And, you know, we want to do as much as we can. And I'm sure you understand our complete solidarity and the pain we are feeling. And as a brown woman from Bangladesh, I completely understand racism and what the whole thing about racism is about. One of the things I wanted to ask, and that's to our colleague from Jerusalem, Javier, do you get, I mean, this thing about how much press we get, we don't get it from our traditional BBC or, you know, but we get it from Al Jazeera, or we try and get it from the social media. Do you know of our peace rallies? Do you get to know that we are there for you? Or do you feel alone? That was my question.
You're all muted.
Adib, now I think you can speak.
Oh, thank you. Hi, guys. Hi, Andreas. I would like to say just an announcement. I agree with all the guys, all the things that the guys have said. It's very important, as Zain said, that we would work all together and make it important to multiply our work and make people know about Palestine, about justice in the whole world. I mean, it's not only the issue of Palestine, it's the issue of the freedom of everyone all around the world. So the announcement is we have a group of activists in Nottingham. We have launched a project, a YouTube channel. We began our first the recording of our first meeting, and we will be showing it soon. And we want everyone, we need everyone's help. That's my call to everyone. We want everyone with us. It's just a few, I mean, a couple of organizations in Nottingham now, but we will begin talking to people in Palestine, my friends, especially people that I know in Palestine that would be able to talk to us, to everyone, and raise the Palestinian voice everywhere. So I made the announcement. I welcome everyone to join us. We will send links and in the time within a couple of weeks to everyone, and we would like anyone who could contribute in any way to join us and to work with us in this very important issue. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Adib. I think there's a very important project there, yeah, to give voice to Palestinian people when our mainstream media, at least in the UK or the West more generally, seems to constantly have Israeli contributions in the various talk shows. They talk to US people, they talk to Israeli about the future of the Palestinian people, and there's not a single Palestinian voice in the discussion. Yeah, and we have to counter that. And that project of yours, Adib, is directly along these lines. So many thanks. Adil from Bridgewater Muslim Action Group, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again to the speakers. Amazing talks. Very good to have you. Just a couple of points, I think, just picking up on what Rahma said and what Yousuf said as well about not only effective communication, but effective movement building. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, tackling the narrative and sort of exposing what's been happening, over the decades in Palestine. But how effective has that been as a tactic for movement building? Because we're constantly against a massive machine that's obviously biased and one-sided. So in terms of us who are trying to make a change, what tactics can we do or use, or do we need to shift our focus from tackling the narrative to other options like BDS, like what we're doing at the university level, what we're doing with the pension funds and all the rest of it? So in terms of next steps, I really want to get down to and hopefully get the opinions of the guests about where we go here and what they've seen has been effective, wherever they've been working. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. Do we have any more interventions from the room, or perhaps if this direct call for input by our speakers, that's a good moment to get back to them. So if there's no one else who would like to raise the voice there, perhaps Xavier, if you get back first, respond to my colleague Lopa's question, but then also to Adil and the question of what is effective from your point of view. Xavier.
Thank you. Well, the first consideration is that unfortunately, I'm not in Jerusalem. I'm not allowed to be in Jerusalem. I'm in Bethlehem. But thanks for the wishful thinking. Perhaps one day I'll be in Jerusalem, just 10 kilometers from there. I don't know if you can see, actually, if I turn the camera a bit, the lights you may see at the end, that's an illegal colonial settlement called Har Homa, which according to Israel is part of Jerusalem, but it's actually stolen land from Bethlehem. Now, regarding the demonstrations in the United Kingdom, they've been impressive and we follow them. So I think there is a difference between our people feeling betrayed by the Western world, feeling lonely from government, of course betrayed by the historical responsibility of the United Kingdom on one side, and what we've seen in so many capitals, or particularly what we've seen in London and other British cities. And I can tell you just one anecdote I had particularly on this issue. I pray at an Episcopal church, which is Anglican, basically, and we go back to the Archbishop of Canterbury, at that time, Justin Welby. And at the beginning of the demonstrations, he had a statement, if I'm not mistaken, to Sky News against the demonstrations. He said something like, those people don't really know what they are doing, or something like this. We had a tremendous response from all the communities, both in Palestine and Jordan. We sent letters to Canterbury that were leaked to The Guardian and the Church Times, to the extent that we ended up getting a response from there. And part of the line that we said is that we feel a lot of hope when we see people on the streets supporting Palestinian freedom, the right to self-determination, equality, and the right of return. And eventually, I think we have to note that the last positions taken by Archbishop Justin Welby were completely different than what he had at the beginning in October 2023. And I think part of the mobilization we have here in Palestine on this issue was due to the demonstrations that were taking place there. So it's not just about you demonstrating in the United Kingdom in support of what we are doing here, because I think this is more of a global movement. Of course, we are very focused on Palestine. We want to end occupation here. But I think throughout this struggle, we've been going through a number of parallel struggles. And part of them, of course, I mean, if you don't support the Palestinian right to self-determination in the United Kingdom, then perhaps we understand what kind of worldview those people have. And this is not just about Palestinian freedom, it's also about freedom in general. So once again, a huge appreciation. Thank you very much for what you've been doing, because it's felt here. I can understand that some people, people I know here, they may not believe that those demonstrations are bringing us much, because we are tired of being in the situation we are. But I think overall, most of our people understand that we are at a turning point. And just like the South African apartheid regime fell, starting by the struggle of the South African people on the ground, but also with international demonstrations that actually started in London. We also believe that we may have also that momentum, and this momentum kind of start also from the United Kingdom. So thank you very much from that perspective. And regarding Adil's question, I don't think that the strategies should be mutually exclusive. And I believe that we have a variety of tools to use and on this struggle. So it's not about doing either a BDS on one side or just demonstrations on the other side. I think we have to make a distinction between what legal obligations are on one side and what kind of other elements we can bring to the table. For example, I believe that, and I think, having Victor here, I would not have the audacity of talking too much about international law. But I believe that one of the obligations, for example, the United Kingdom would have, it's not just to stop the trade of weapons with a country that is being investigated for the crime of genocide at the International Criminal Court, like Israel, but also it goes to the extent of the fundraising that takes place on a daily basis in the United Kingdom for the benefit of settlements. I mean, it's not just about the Israeli government, how much, or the Israeli state, how much they can profit. We talk about institutions like the Jewish National Fund or like the Israel Land Fund, that they are fundraising as we speak in the United Kingdom, and their funds are largely going to settlements in the occupied West Bank. In my hometown here, Bet Jal, in the Bethlehem district, we are facing the occupation of our green area, the Mahrur Valley, which is a World Heritage Site at UNESCO alongside Batir, being committed by settlers working for the Jewish National Fund. And part of the funding of the Jewish National Fund comes from the United Kingdom. So I believe that one of the main messages we've had, and Palestinian civil society has had, and international civil society is that we can all influence in our own spectrum, and we can all influence with whatever we can do. The fact that that the Israeli Football Association is still part of UEFA, is still part of FIFA, that's a scandal. I mean, our stadiums here, they have been bombarded, turned into torture and detention centers. Is the Israeli Football Association is federating teams from illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. I mean, that's not just against international law, it's against the FIFA statutes, yet they get this green light. And as I said a few days ago, too many green lights let Israel believe that they have no red lines. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're facing, and that's why I think what you are doing is extremely important. Last point, I think over the past few weeks in Israel, if you follow Israeli media, one of the most important issues has been the campaign to prosecute alleged Israeli war criminals while they are on vacations elsewhere. And the fact that you had Israeli newspapers like Yediot Aharonot, which is the largest newspaper, publishing a guide for Israelis outside on what they should be doing if they are taken to court or they are denounced. Or, for example, what we saw in Latin America, where soldiers had to run away from Brazil and Chile, going to Argentina in order to escape the respective courts. It's not the first time that people accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity go to Argentina, by the way. There were some people going there some 80 years ago for crimes that I think you understand what I'm talking about. So eventually, I mean, this has an impact, and Israel feels threatened. The fact that some of you cannot come here because of your activism in the United Kingdom, I think it's all you need to know about how effective you can be. We need more, but I think we should not. We should still be thankful for all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Rahma, over to you.
Sorry, technology
There you
is
are.
definitely not my forte. So I was going to say something. It's very interesting. You know, I hear the label activist a lot, and that also is a ploy in my regard. You calling someone an activist makes it seem as if it's a niche, but it should be the absolute norm to say killing kids is wrong and occupying a land is wrong. So I would even take away the word activist, because sort of politicians sometimes skew it in a way, even mainstream media uses it. And speaking about students, I'd find a lot of media outlets just calling the encampments the activists rather than, so it takes away from them being students, and it's a continued means of taking away from the person and making it as if it's a label. It also sometimes intimidates other people's grassroots efforts. It's like as if this is a fight for activists, or this is something that only activists speak about or only politicians speak about. This is a mainstream issue where everyone ought to speak up. Adil, I'm assuming you're in one of the student encampments. I've been to 7 of the student encampments, and sometimes some of the issues that who am I to say, but the issues that even some people would speak up about is that suddenly conversations would go about what ideology are you? Suddenly a conversation about socialism, suddenly a conversation about communism. You are nothing at this point. Everyone who is speaking up for the Palestinian plight is a blank canvas. You are simply a messenger. So not to personalize issues, and this way it sort of brings egos into play. Even when I see sometimes initiatives where it's the Muslim club, the Christian club, it really just will dilute. This is a place for everyone to speak up, because as Xavier was saying, this is an issue, and I loved what he stated. They've had so many green lights, they feel that they don't have red lights, and this is what you're seeing now. It's a bully that's been empowered, that's been enabled, and therefore for you to combat this, it's not one knock on the door, it's millions of knocks on the door. It's combating through narrative. It's by leading protests. It's by these encampments. It's definitively by combating the narrative. Because when you look at the noise that I was talking about, they bog you down with conversations that are unnecessary, that takes away from, again, the simplicity of this: an oppressor and an oppressed, a theft of land and life. They will obviously undermine you in order to justify thieving. They're going to, if I say that, if I acknowledge that I'm stealing something from you, I need to give it back. I don't want to give it back. And therefore, I'm going to justify taking it. And when you look at that, you need to realize that narrative is important, and you stick unapologetically to your own key message, that this is an oppressor and this is an oppressed. So that when they try and meander, or when they try and throw these bizarre balls at you, you don't waste your time debating back or defending back, because it gives the truth. You ignore it and you be louder than it. You be louder than it by reiterating and speaking with your own key messages even louder. That's it. And you keep going as if you're winning, which is the case. This is the beginning of the end. No one acts like such a frenzied shark unless they are on the brink of extinction. So you act accordingly, that this is the end of Zionism. This is not an ideology that is sustainable. This is an ideology that is dangerous to all, and you need to act accordingly. Do not waste your time with their narrative. Waste your time and not waste your time. Put your time in empowering your own narrative.
Very powerful. Thank you, Rahma. Yousuf.
Yeah, I think both Xavier and Rahma very eloquently answered the question, and there's very little I can add to that. Firstly, I would like to echo the point that there shouldn't be any competition, not amongst ideologies or also amongst organizations. When we engage in activism, when we engage in work, we are not doing this as a tool to further the aims and objectives or the profile of our organization. We do it because it is our human duty. In terms of what is effective, I think number one, we do need to amplify the Palestinian voice, amplify what the Palestinians want. This is you know, we are there as a way to accelerate this. Do we need to build a narrative? I would agree. Yes, absolutely, we do. And there are many reasons for that. I think a lot of the time when we think about what's effective in activism, a lot of the time we would want to see results very quickly, right? Or sometimes it can be reactive. But really, I think beyond that, we have to sort of think, what is the world that we want to live in, right? What sort of world do we want to build? Because Palestine is one example of how cruel the world can be and how cruel ideologies can be, how cruel systems can be. Through narrative building, we can expose these systems and show that these people have claimed to be the bastions of democracy. These people have been claimed to be the bastions of human rights, etc., when really they have committed one of the worst crimes against humanity in human history. Malcolm X has a very famous quote that if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound that the blow had made, and they haven't even pulled the knife out, much less heal the wound. They won't even argue that the knife is there. So this is something for victims of global white supremacy to consider. It's something that we do have to think. We have a narrative. We are in service of the oppressed of the world. We are here to counter tyranny. We are here to counter oppression. We are here to counter injustice in any single form that it may manifest itself in. Simple. Darkness versus light. Right versus wrong. Ethics versus the lack of ethics. Justice against injustice. This is how simple it is. But we cannot be given lessons about what is right from those who are ultimately wrong. Those sitting in the corridors of power who have not only enabled a genocide, but have actively participated in a genocide. We cannot be learning lessons from them. We want to build a new world. We want to think about what will replace this systematic injustice that is being placed against people and is inherently violent and is leading to the death of thousands upon thousands of innocents. Our narrative is one about truth against falsehood. And it's as simple as that. But we absolutely must engage in this. We shouldn't think, oh, we've had a success here or success there, or be too quick to think okay, we've been successful in this way, as the speakers before me have very eloquently and much better than I would be able to do, have said that this is a multifaceted approach. Everyone has a role to play here, whether that's academics who are analyzing trends, whether that's journalists who are reporting the news, whether that's someone handing out a leaflet. Everyone has a role to play. No one should be belittled, and we should not just be on success, because ultimately the success has already come.
Thanks a lot, Yousuf. Excellent. Adib, I've seen you shared your screen. That was on purpose, yeah? Is that correct?
Yes, Andreas, I just was answering the question of Adil by putting my article. It was written a few days ago, and I would like to share I wanted to share the link, but I didn't know how. Can I do that? But it's okay.
If you have actually that's so first of all, thanks for sharing. And secondly, if you have a link, you can put it in the chat. Would that be a way of doing it?
I tried to, I couldn't. I will send
Okay.
it to you by email, and it's in lots of groups, WhatsApp groups
Okay.
of Nottingham.
Fantastic.
So maybe you will be more able to do that, to send to the guys who are in the meeting today.
I will do that.
It is about the two-state solution.
Yeah.
That is, it's been used I mean, for a long time to just justify what's happening now and what's happening all the time. I mean, just deceiving people and letting them hope that something could happen through this silly idea of two-state solution. I mean, when in this situation, it is really a silly idea. So, okay, I'm not gonna read the article, so I will send it, and I'll send it to you by email, and please forward it to everyone.
That would be
Okay.
brilliant. Yes, please send it. Send it
Yeah.
out. That's excellent. We've got 10 minutes to 5. I mean, you do raise an important question there, and perhaps this is the question we can put to our speakers just to round off the event. Yeah, you say, are we soft? Are we too soft and apologetic in our narrative? Can we justify a two-state solution when one state has shown beyond doubt its genocidal intent on the other? I'm happy to throw that out there. And Xavier, Rahma, Yousuf, do you want to make a brief comment on that?
If I may, you know, I don't think the problem is the idea of a two-state solution. To be very honest with you, if we can get a two-state solution that guarantees the end of the Israeli occupation, that guarantees equality for all Israeli citizens, including over 20% of Israel citizens that are Palestinians, and the right of return of Palestinian refugees, then what will be the problem then? I think the main problem though is that the way this has been framed so far over the past 30 years is that the two-state solution and the peace process, more than the two-state solution itself, the peace process as a concept, has been used as a smokescreen to prevent the international community from taking action on the systematic Israeli violations that are taking place here. And I think for Palestinians, it would be, the question has not been on one state or two states mainly. There was a political decision of the PLO in 1988 to move for a two-state solution, given all the other perspectives that I mentioned, that a two-state solution would not affect the rights that all Palestinians have wherever they are, and the right, of course, the right of return, which is not cancelled by the two-state solution per se. But I think the idea that came throughout that process, which is basically let's make the parties talk. So it's better for the parties to talk, and let's not intervene. Let them get to a solution, so it would be harmful for the process to take action. No, I think that's part of the problem. The problem is that the avoidance of making and of imposing sanctions after so many resolutions have been violated. That's part of the problem. Now, I think that having said so, I think that there is a very important percentage of Palestinians that at this stage They have given up on the prospects of a two-state solution on the 1967 border, and they believe that the best idea would be to have one single democratic state with equal rights for everyone. But at this stage, I think we should focus on the idea of decolonization. We should focus on the idea of ending the Israeli occupation. We should focus on the idea of implementing the Palestinian right to self-determination. And because we are not yet at the stage of a political solution.
Thank you, Javier.
Mm.
Rahma, would you like to speak to that?
I'm going to echo what Javier has basically said, which is reiterating that it is impossible to conduct a peace process with someone pointing a gun to your head. So for you to start building something, you need the appropriate infrastructure to build on. But how can I build on a peace process with someone who does not believe I have a right to exist? We're now speaking that Palestinian existence is resistance. If I am speaking to someone who is looking at me as lesser than, whose whole ideology is based on expelling and exterminating me, then how can I discuss peace with this person? So for you to do that, you need a sort of clean slate. And also I don't want to speak on behalf of Palestinians. At the end of the day, I know where my what ought to be done stops. This is a conversation to be had with Palestinians who haven't been allowed to be on the table. This was the issue to begin with. The creation of the Zionist state didn't have a conversation with Palestinians to begin with. So maybe we need to learn from that mistake. We need to realize what the issue is, decolonize, give Palestinians the mere right to return, have Palestinians able to travel within their own land, allow Palestinians to live in safety without a soldier who is able to waltz into my house, shoot my child, and then go, as we were just speaking about, on holiday elsewhere in another nation, and then start speaking peace. But how can I speak about peace when someone is able to take so much liberty on my land and on my life?
Thank you, Rahma. Final word to you, Yousuf.
Yeah, I'm going to answer more about are we being soft and apologetic rather than the idea of the two-state solution given time constraints and how long a topic it is. I think that we have to realize that we have to be a lot more defendant of ourselves, and we have to move beyond being apologetic, but also understand that when you are speaking for the truth, you have a duty to expose what is wrong. In the past, we have been, trying to prove that we are peaceful people. We've been trying to prove that we are human, etc. And I think a key thing is we have to do much, much more to expose who the genocidal people in the world are. Very much, it's the global West, right? And being critical of the West does not mean maligning. It does not mean dehumanizing. Being critical of the West simply means to expose, right? The Holocaust happened in the West. Ghettos against Jewish people happened in the West. In fact, many of the former Jewish ghettos in the UK today are now considered Muslim ghettos because they are being populated with people from predominantly Pakistani or Bangladeshi backgrounds. The Gaza genocide, the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestine, is not the only thing that the West is supporting. JCB, who are making their bulldozers, are also using this as the bulldozer genocide in India, demolishing land of the Kashmiris. And we have to realize that this ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people has empowered more people in the world to accelerate their injustices against people. So we should never shy away of showing realities how they are, and we must have the confidence to expose the Western world for its crimes against humanity. We have to move beyond saying the colonial past, because we are living in the colonial present. Thank you.
That's a very powerful statement to end on with our seminar this afternoon. Many thanks to our three speakers, Xavier, Rahma, and Yousuf, for your excellent interventions. Of course, this is just one step in the process of the liberation of Palestine. Yeah, we can't end here in this seminar. The actions have to carry on locally and nationally. We have another national demonstration this Saturday in London. There will be events locally here in Nottingham. The struggle carries on as always. But many thanks, everyone, for your contributions. Many thanks for your questions, and see you in the next action. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.